Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. I am glad to be with you. Today is our 48th episode. It is Friday, March 5th of 2021. I'm going to share the plan here today. Today we've got a jam-packed show. First up, our COVID Connect COVID news. Then Dr. Hirak Parikh from the Michigan Biomedical Venture Fund. Then Jeff Rinvelt telling us about an upcoming event with Renaissance Venture Capital. And our friend Ken Spenser talking about the Massey TBI initiative and recent awesome news out of the local company Fifth Eye. After that, it's the pitch party, then on to Q&A, and we're going to try to jam that all into the next hour. So with that, I want to take you without further ado to the COVID metrics, these from covidtracking.com. And as you know, we've loved the site, but they're shutting it down March 7th, or at least they're stopping the data collection because they are feeling that the CDC is finally doing a good enough job collecting that they're going to turn it over to them. And at this point, this curve continues to drop, as you're all aware. We're nearly back down to sort of the baseline levels we were seeing last June, last September, and that is good news all around. In Michigan, the latest, the curve seems to have bottomed out in hospitalizations, down below the 1,000 level there. And in terms of vaccine distribution from the New York Times, what we've seen is about a 2% jump in the scale this week in terms of first vaccine distributions. So that continues to creep up as we've seen before. And actually, we had wondered if we'd hit a plateau in the new reported doses administered. And it looks like maybe not. Looks like the country's back on track and it keeps climbing at approximately a straight line there. If you ask when will we be up to a higher number of vaccines, when a given share of the US population might be at least partially vaccinated. This also from the New York Times. They've got it all in one article there, so if you go there, you can see all of this. If it keeps on at the same pace, 50% vaccination by June, 70% by August 8th, 90% by October 6th. So that's very cool. All of this has led me to one large question, and I ask it as a question and not as an answer. We do not have answers to these things that people will be studying for years here, but there's kind of an elephant in the room, and I want to ask this question and get y'all thinking about it. And that, first of all, starts with what is required for herd immunity? And we find from Johns Hopkins that usually 50 to 90% of a population needs immunity to achieve herd immunity. That's cool. Well, what's required for herd immunity? This from the Mayo Clinic. Experts estimate that in the US, 70% of the population, which is more than 200 million people, would have to recover from COVID or presumably get the vaccine in order to halt the epidemic. Where are we now? Well, these numbers, 50% of the population would be about 164 million Americans. 70% would be about 230 million Americans. And 90% would be about 295 million Americans. As of today, there are about 111 million Americans who are estimated to have either gotten the vaccine or have been positive COVID cases. That number was much lower in January. It might have been as low as 30 million. Nevertheless, here's the question. Why did this start dropping in mid-January? Why did the curve start dropping? Because we haven't reached the numbers required for herd immunity, and yet it's been dropping off without any major changes at that time period. Well, it's this question and many others I want to ask of our guest next week, who, as you know, is Dr. Ing Pottinger. This will be her second appearance on the show, and she gave us such wonderful insights the first time around last May that we're looking forward to asking her this and many other questions about what's happened over the last year. So tune in next week because we're really excited about talking to Dr. Pottinger. I want to catch you up on a few other news items. We're going to have some news later on, but I want to catch on this too. Our friends at MedHealth and Scale Health, Wednesday the 17th, healthcare burnout and how to address it. That event's still available. And of course, the A2 Biosocial. We had Matthew Himes on last week telling us about the next installment of that, Tuesday, March 9th from 5 to 7 p.m. On Sakoko. You can register at mishbio.org/events. And finally, a little plug for ourselves here at Into Being. We are seeking an embedded systems developer. We would love to have you pass that news on and let us know if you know of anybody with those kind of credentials. And so with that, I want to stop the share And after that fire hose of information, I want to welcome our first guest, Dr. Hirak Parikh with the Michigan Biomedical Venture Fund on to MedTech Crossroads. Hirak, how are you doing today?
Great, thanks, Gene. Glad to be on the show. I've been looking forward to it. So I have a slide. I can pull that up, or how do you want to do it, Gene?
Yeah, go ahead and pull this slide up, because what we want to do is people hear about all these different entities, and you're of course associated with the University of Michigan, but sometimes it's hard to keep track of how they all go together. And let's take a look at that.
So you should see sort of the whole ecosystem there with all the acronyms, and we have a lot of those at the University of Michigan. So maybe this map will sort of make sense, or hopefully where we sit and where things sit with innovation and commercialization at the university. I guess I can kind of start at the beginning where University of Michigan is one of the largest research public universities in the nation. We generate tremendous number of ideas, and a number of them go on to become commercial products. But obviously there's some sort of gap, and there've been a number of initiatives that have been in development over the last 10 years. So when I went to school at Michigan about 15 years ago, there wasn't much. I mean, yeah, you were kind of really on your own if you wanted to start a company, but things are very different now. We have a very engaged ecosystem, including the Office of Tech Transfer. We've got a number of different initiatives that sort of help you bridge that proverbial valley of death. So, obviously you can get money from the NIH, which is great because that's grant funding, that's non-dilutive. And then there's been a number of other initiatives over time. So MTRAC, as a lot of you are familiar with, which used to be only University of Michigan, now it's statewide. And there are different kinds of MTRACs. There's 3 of them. One's transportation, one's advanced computing, and then one's life sciences that's sort of administered by University of Michigan, but it's statewide. And then we've got the Coulter Foundation, which is an endowed program that's been in existence, I think, since 2013. But it's been around for a while to basically commercialize med devices. And Gene, you're pretty familiar with the Coulter program. And a recent initiative has been the Franklin Innovation Initiative, which is a $20 million gift from the Stuart and Maxine Frankel. And their goal is to basically help things that don't get usual grant funding, but are high risk, but could be potentially high impact as well. So there's a lot of funding that's available for new ideas, and sort of the Michigan Biomedical Venture Fund that I run bridges that gap between some of these intramural translational grant programs and I would say the private sector or the venture capital community. So the MBVF is now in year 6. We were started in 2016. And the idea was to have a place for a lot of the projects that are coming from these different programs and spinning out as startups and funding them. So, we would be the first investor, the first lead investor making these early investments in these companies. So the difference between, I guess, one question is that I need to explain to some of the faculty is that it is a venture fund. So, we are taking an equity stake. This is not grant money. So we're not necessarily giving money away. We're giving money and taking a small slice of the company with the intention that if the company does well, the fund does well, and that money gets plowed back to other ventures from the university. So our fund invests in only University of Michigan startups and exclusively in the life sciences. Life sciences defined somewhat broadly, so it could be med devices, it could be therapeutics, it could be healthcare IT, it could be software. And the other point that I should note is that we get some university support, but the majority of the investment dollars come from philanthropic donations. And it's an evergreen fund, so there's no life cycle to the venture fund. The idea is that any donation that comes to the fund goes and funds all these startups, and any distributions that we get, or any returns that we just get plowed back to the fund. So there's no the money just basically stays in the fund with the intention that we'll go and fund the next set of startups, right? So it's sort of a gift that continues to give in perpetuity. So that's sort of the background of, I guess, the ecosystem. I mean, I can stop there, Gene, if you've got questions, but we can kind of talk about what the fund's invested in, or I don't know, however you want to sort of take the
Yeah, I think this is a great picture to have up there while we talk about it, because we often talk on the show about what people need to understand at different stages that their company is at and that their ideas are at. And we very frequently focus on those, physician innovators who are very early in the process, and we're well familiar with how things like MTRAC and Coulter and other funding things at different universities try to do that translational research. And we know a lot of the things that they bump into, like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Oh, I've got to think about who the market would be. I mean, come on, this is completely new news to me. And by the time they've gotten through something like that, they've been forced a little bit to think about those topics. But what strikes me as really interesting about MBVF is that you guys you're one step further. This maybe isn't the first time they've encountered those, but now they're going to start encountering questions that they would actually encounter in a VC context outside of the university. So maybe give us a little bit of a picture from your perspective. What are some of the common discussions that you have to have with these founders? Now they're being challenged with really I guess maybe it's the third level at that point. I mean, U of M, I know, has Kickstart and MTRAC and Coulter, and at various levels they're getting challenged with these ideas. But what are the unique challenges that you then and hurdles that you offer up to these innovators that are maybe preceding the VC world?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. And one thought that occurred to me when I looked at this, when I was looking at this graph in front of me. So one thing is it seems sort of a linear thing, but the point to be noted is these are circular things, right? You may bump into this wall, and then you may be sent back by some of the committees, and a lot of folks in the ecosystem are part of these boards, and you are part of some of these boards as well, Gene. Is that it's a circular process, right? So we expect it not to be a sort of a linear thing. But yes, there are different questions at different stages. Obviously, at the intramural, research level, they are more sort of scientific translational questions that they bump into, is like, is this going to work? Do you have enough data, right? So that the funding is primarily for those kinds of things. But when they come to us, our goal is really partly is, since we are the university, is also education, right? And I would characterize ourselves as sort of a friendly venture fund because we are sort of on the side of these startups. We want the startups to succeed. And we have an investment advisory board that's made up of operators, very experienced VCs who are, some of them on the coast, a lot of them local as well. And the idea is to give them sort of a friendly feedback that they would get if they were out fundraising. And a lot of these companies do need to fundraise a lot more than we can offer them. So the idea is that we're going to give you very honest, direct feedback, feedback that you will get or you may not get from other VC folks, but we'll give that to you because we are friends and we want you to come back, keeping in mind this whole circular process of coming back with maybe fixing some of these problems. And to your earlier point, a lot of these questions are less to do with scientific or translational ones because they've already solved that, right? So in some sense, I do have an easier job because by the time the companies come to me, they've been vetted or they've gone through multiple filters at the lower level, if you want to call it, right, through MTRAC or Coulter, and they've got tons of feedback from various people in the ecosystem who sit on these boards, and knowing that this is early and they're still not a startup yet. So when they come to us, that's the first barrier, right? Like, okay, so now what's your business model? What's your team, right? So it's less scientific and technical evaluation. What we are trying to assess for is less of that. It's mostly other things that VCs would look for, which is team, market, execution, those kinds of things.
And tell us what you've been seeing. I know you have made a number of investments at this point. The fund used to be called the Monroe Brown Seed Fund. You've been going for 6 years, so this is not a new game at this point. Tell us a little bit about what kinds of things you've seen, what kinds of deals you've gone into insofar as
Yeah,
you
maybe I
could
should
share
pull up
that.
let me pull up the next slide, which kind of
Yeah.
tells you a current portfolio right now. So that's our current portfolio. So this is year 6. We recently made a couple of investments. So we are up to 12 right now. And like I said, we invest pretty broadly across all therapeutics. So every single of these companies is some sort of company that's a spin out from University of Michigan IP in the life sciences. So one thing we're trying to do is we're also trying to operate as a fund. So we try to keep somewhat the portfolio also balanced among different sectors. So we don't want to have everything that's therapeutics or everything that's diagnostic. So, we balance it with that. We also trying to balance with, a little bit of stage. And obviously, some of the questions that you're asking are somewhat general in nature, but every company is very unique. And, on a case by case basis, there'd be always exceptions, but, when I say these comments, they're sort of in general, right? We can talk about specific companies as well, but we've invested in 12 companies. We've put about 2.2 million in these companies, and one of our goals is obviously the feedback and education piece to the ones that we don't fund or we do fund. But the ones that we have invested in, our real goal is to act as a catalyst or an accelerator. Like, can these companies now go and get venture capital, right? Have we actually made that bridge? And our leverage is, as you can see from the statistics, about 26. So for every dollar that we've invested in, the companies have raised 26 times that on average, right? I mean, every company doesn't do that, but in general, at least they get 2 or 3 times that capital. So if you think of a regular, like a seed round, right? Let's say it's $1 million or $1.5 million, we'll put in 150, 200, we'll lead the round, but we want these companies to go and get the balance 700 or 800 K from other investors in the community. And I would say all 12, every single company that you see on the list has been sort of co-funded with some sort of syndicate locally or has got some sort of grant funding. So from the university's perspective, I mean, this is great, right? We put a little bit of money and, they get sort of a boost in raising capital.
That's great. And there's a question there from Lynn, who I think it's germane to what you're on right now. Funding amounts for individual companies, max amounts was her question.
Yeah, so the minimum amount that we have funded any company is about 100K. And as we get more capital, so like I said, the fund is evergreen, right? So we started off with 3 million, we've added more and we've got some more commitments. So hopefully our check size will get a little bit larger on the first round. And then, we keep some reserves for follow-on funding as well, because, the need for money is a perennial thing, right? It never sort of ends, right? So initially we want to be the first investor. We'll take a chance on many first-time founders. We'll take a chance on, things that others won't, and that's kind of our job. And the second time when we put the next amount, maybe it's 200 or 300, our goal is to make sure that there are other folks, at the table who can support the company beyond, the Series A or Series B, right? Because we can make one investment, we can make 2 investments, and then sort of we take a back seat. So recently ONL Therapeutics, I mean, they raised $46 million, right? I mean, that's far larger than the size of our total fund, right? But that's kind of a good example of a company that we invested early that has gone on successfully to go and raise more capital. So we're sort of in a passive state there. But some of our other investments are very early, and we've sort of led those rounds, set the terms. So yeah, our minimum is 100K, maximum is about 250 or 300, and that'll change as we get more capital.
Gotcha. So 100 to 250K, but expanding as the fund expands. Well, in what you've seen over the last number of years, Hirak, I think your perspective is unique because you're watching companies that are not necessarily just finding their legs. You're watching companies that are finding their legs now going out into the funding world. What have been your biggest frustrations? Like, we have noted that what's happening in Michigan is bigger than it's ever been before. Like you said at the beginning, there's more happening than there was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. There's more resources available. But looking forward to where we're going, what do you see as maybe the limitations? What could be better? How can we make this better in the future?
Yeah, so I guess before talking about the negatives, I'll tell you a bit of the positives. When we started the fund in 2016 and the kind of companies that we're looking at or seeing right now, and this is just, within the university, but it sort of, paints a broader picture of the whole
Mhm.
ecosystem and the whole state, if you want to sort of, use that as a marker or of what's happening, in the state, is that the companies are a lot better. In fact, we've had to make a lot of tough choices. In fact, we have said no to things that we would have said yes to before. And that's because, we're limited, right? We make 2 investments a year. We'd like to do 5, but we can't, so, and we are really happy to see that some of these companies that we have said no to for various reasons, for portfolio reasons and, management of risk and so forth, that they've gone and raised capital from other funds that are out there. There's been a lot of increase in that, right? So I think that's been great. So the ecosystem has matured. There are more programs. I think we've been able to attract a lot of people to the ecosystem lately that have gone and taken roles at these companies, and that's a big thing. I've seen a big shift as well, where we're seeing people with a lot of experience in the Bay Area or in other places or other startups that are coming here. They want to move here for family reasons, other reasons, are taking an active role in these companies, right? And that's been the big game changer. To your original question about frustrations, like you said, when we look at companies, they're hitting that third wall. They're getting questions that they haven't seen before, right? And a lot of people that we deal with are graduate students, faculty who science and technology is exemplary, right? There's never a question that's of question, right? The biggest question is always for things that we turn down is a business model, right? I mean, therapeutics is totally different beast. So I'm not talking about therapeutics, but other stuff is like, how are you going to make money, right? If it's a med device, the big question is like, how are you going to get in the hospital, right? Like, you may have a spectacular device, but how are you going to be able to sell it, and get in, right? That's a big question, right? And then there's, regulatory questions, right? What are the other regulations out there? How long it's going to take you to get, FDA approval, under what classification you would come in, those kinds of things. I mean, with the software companies, a little bit more direct. It's also understanding, what is your competition, right? Like, if you really narrowly define your competition, then there's no competition, right? Like, but, I mean, there is competition, right? So that's kind of the frustration, is like, sometimes the companies don't have a very solid business model. They haven't really thought about it. They're like, oh, this is great. This is wonderful. Like, yeah, I mean, it is wonderful, but, where is it going to go? That's number one. Competition is one. And, we are trying to put on a venture hat as well. And we're trying to assess, what's the market risk, right? Like, is the market going to accept this product? And then we are also trying to assess the execution risk, and we're willing to take a little bit of that risk because we understand that these companies are new, and maybe it's not time to hire a full-blown team. But we want to have that sort of confidence that these companies will be able to attract that talent, and it has been true with almost every single case that's in our portfolio, right? From speaking from experiences, the companies that are doing well are the ones that have been able to successfully attract that second level of executive talent as they grow and scale, right? Like, so, you're asking for a skill set that is not the skill set that a faculty or a graduate student went to school for, right? Like, these are like business, marketing, fundraising questions, networking questions, right? So you need sort of, someone to augment those skills, right? So that's something that we're trying to assess as well. And I mean, if your product still has some sort of technology risk at this stage when they come across, I mean, that's really sort of a no-go for us, right? So that'd be kind of like, that we turn them down, because we also feel that it's okay for companies to come and talk to us, because then we can always send them back to some of these other programs. And I mean, there's so many programs right now that I don't know of a single company that's actually checked off every box, right? Like, if you are smart and if you went through every single program, you could, I mean, get like $1 million or $2 million in non-dilutive funding before you even spun that startup out, right? So, and nobody does that, right? So in a way, you're sort of leaving some of the money on the table. So, there is no rush to spin your company out, right? You want to spin it out when you're ready, as well. So that's kind of one, I would say, one way that that's founders could be smarter in how they sort of launch, the timing of that launch and how they sequence it. Because you don't want to launch a company and then spend, a whole year just raising capital, right? It's a waste of everybody's time.
It's interesting because I think being positioned sort of at this what shall I say, this almost like the second grown-up stage. That the translational research work is sort of the, okay, first let's think that a market even exists, or wrestle with some of these questions the first time, and then you're sort of at this next level. I feel like what I'm hearing a little bit is it's something that's often lost on founders, which is this isn't going to be the get rich quick, do it and it's all going to be great kind of a thing. There's multiple shots on goal you need. There's the issues that are going to come down that you never even thought about. There's the issue of, do I have the team that can take me that next leg, which is a very different talent set than the initiation. Future down the road, it's can you do sustaining things, but you've got this sort of interim type of team that's needed. And I think what we're hearing today is both on a funding side and on a team side, your message is kind of, hey startup, you don't even recognize this next set of problems you're going to run into. You think that the very first thing you see is what you're gonna beat and then win. But it's almost like a false summit for anyone who's ever hiked up a mountain. Sometimes you see a summit and that's not actually the summit. The next summit is things like, do you have the right team to get across the commercialization line? And it sounds like you're really getting to see some of that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, from our perspective, like, it's kind of, as a lot of people know, this is sort of a long game, right? This is not a get rich scheme. It's a game of patience in a way. And, sometimes it's even better for a founder to admit failure of that first summit and decide a different hill to climb, right? Like, we would be really interested in looking at some of these founders who come back with better ideas in a different field when they realize, okay, this is not going to work. I'm going to try something else, but I'm going to take all the lessons from this one and apply it somewhere else. I mean, that's going to be very interesting, right? Like, this is going to take time, right? I mean, we've been it seems kind of a long time. It's year 6, but actually in a time scale of, life cycle, that's kind of short, and we did a study of like 2 decades of University of Michigan startups. It takes about 7 years for a company since spin out, not from the invention of technology, but since they've spun out, to get some sort of exit, IPO, or they shut down, right? Like, so 7 years it takes a while, right? And we hope that time shortens, and I can see that shorten. And then the other thing is, you're faced with someone like a faculty who's got probably one of the best jobs on the planet, which is a tenured job at the University of Michigan, trading for probably one of the worst jobs, which is like a startup CEO, right? Like, with the highest risk, so it's also a change of mindset, right? And some people adapt to that, and being able to sort of think of it as a totally different thing, because, as a scientist or as a graduate student, you're focused, your focus very narrow and deep. But as a business person, now you've got to consider a lot of different perspectives and factors that you cannot control, right? You're not in a lab where you're in control of every single variable. You're subject to market forces, funding forces, flavors of the month in terms of how in the industry is moving. Like, you could be working on a perfectly valid, strong idea with a lot of conviction, but the time may not be right, right? It's also accepting some of that, and that's tough, right? Because some of these people that we deal with are not used to failure, right? They've succeeded in every possible thing and have climbed a summit, which is, a tenured job at the University of Michigan, right? So, that is tough, right? To be the bearer of bad news sometimes.
It's so interesting because when you say the average is 7 years to an exit or a closure, and how could we make it faster? I think we've been talking about all sorts of resources that are coming around to make the process better and faster. But you just touched on one of the quickest ways to come to a conclusion, and that is to sometimes admit failure, and sometimes you pivot, and sometimes you just shut it down. But give us a little bit more of your perspective on that. I mean, sometimes we run into this sunk cost fallacy. We run into too big to fail. What's your gut? And everyone's going to have different perspectives on this. Different investors are going to have different perspectives. But at what point in your mind is the trigger when you say, this path isn't the right path, we're going to pivot? At what point do you say, let's keep pushing forward? And at what point do you say, this was a great experiment? Like Edison, we tried 4,000 things that don't work. Now we know 4,000 things that don't work. We're going to shut this one down. What's your personal perspective on how you triage that?
I mean, that's a hard question. I mean, we make the investment in the company, and our thesis is that this company is going to figure it out, right? Like, we say no to things that we think is not going to work, and we also kind of we are also sort of banking and betting on the founders to do that. And I think that probably some of our companies, including some in our portfolio or just locally in the ecosystem, are around too long, right? Like, you could have taken that time in a different venture and would have been more successful than kind of plugging away. And that's probably sort of a mindset, like, hey, I don't want to let my investors down. I don't want to let my employees down by admitting failure and switching to something else. So I think that's something that I think we need to get better as an ecosystem. And from my investor perspective, also be more forgiving of a founder that says, well, I tried it, I gave it my best shot. And then trust them again, like to, go and start something, not like, hey, you failed that one. Now I'm not, you're never going to get money from me again. Right. Like, so I think the way to do that, and that's an individual personal decision because it affects a lot of people, is to understand, like, what is your hypothesis, right? What did you set out to do? What happened, right? Like, is it a moment to pivot, or you tried something and it didn't work, or you got beat out by competition, or like the time has come and gone for your technology, right? You were just too late. And that is I think it's an individual decision for every company, right? Like when they should do that. And we want to trust that our founders and their teams and their boards are going to give them the advice to do that. We don't want to necessarily, intervene or kind of act like we know everything, but I would say that probably, some companies are around longer. That's one. And then the other, on the flip side is, investors should be more forgiving of failure, right? And trust that, well, they learned all the wrong things in the first company, so they're not gonna make those mistakes again, right? That's another way to look at it, right? So I think that, we need to be a little bit more forgiving, and investors and maybe founders need to be a little bit kinder to themselves, saying, yeah, I tried my best and this is not a bad thing. I'm gonna go start something else.
If we're really learning from it and really the learnings are ones that we couldn't have done something different about, then it really is a valuable step for the whole community. I want to give the audience a quick quick moment to ask questions. So feel free to raise your hand if you've got a question for Hirak with Michigan Biomedical Venture Fund out of the University of Michigan. While we're waiting to see if anyone has any questions, Hirak, before we go, I've got to ask you the question that I ask everybody, because you're not a spring chicken anymore. You don't get to claim that. I maybe at some point when we first met, you could have claimed that, but now you're in it, you're doing it, you're continuing it, you're growing it. And the question that I always ask people is, what's your passion? Why do you do it? Why not just go out and do something else? Why do you do this?
I enjoy it, frankly. I think for me, it's just, learning something new every day, right? Like there's 12 companies in our portfolio. Now I know 12 things pretty intimately that I would have known before. That's part of it. It's just sort of a knowledge, kind of like, accumulating knowledge and understanding about various things. And the other is just the people that, that have been a chance to interact with people locally in the ecosystem. I mean, everyone's, very collegial, very friendly. I think everybody wants the same thing, right? Like I sit on a particular vantage point. I'm trying to do something in my own little world. And there's, a lot of co-investors. They're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to do it statewide, or they're trying to do it for the city of Detroit or locally. And I think that's been great, right? There isn't this sort of cutthroat mentality that you hear of, right? Like sometimes I hear these venture capital stories, like that's not true of our ecosystem, right? So that's part of it as well. I think for me personally, it's also gratifying to see some of the bets that we took early and they've gone and grown, right? Like now we've got, 120 jobs have been created, right? 10 out of 12 companies have, all 12 have raised some more rounds, right? So there's growth, and it's, I think it's satisfying, rewarding to see that it's actually sort of working, right? I mean, I don't know, not time to pivot yet.
Not time to pivot yet. That's great. I love it. Hirak Parikh, Michigan Biomedical Venture Fund. Thank you for being with us today on MedTech Crossroads.
Thanks a lot, Gene. It was a pleasure.
Great having you. Next up, I think today is funding day because we're just talking about funding all day long until the pitch party. Next up, I've got Jeff Rinvelt from Renaissance Venture Capital here to tell us about something called the hotlist. Welcome back to the show, Jeff.
Hey, well, thanks for having me. This is a great lead up after having Hirak on. So this is amazing.
This is wonderful. And I happened to notice, I think the last time you were on the show, we had a pretty gray day happening. The sunlight is pouring through your window there.
Hopefully you can see my face. I should put
You're
up more
fine.
blinders and stuff like that. But yeah, last time was not as exciting. Now I'm sort of sweating in my sunroom. So this is much better.
We're so thankful to see spring coming. Tell us
Yep.
about this hot list.
So, as we described last time, Renaissance is sort of this unique perspective in the community. We invest in venture capital firms, so we have a lot of relationship with venture capital firms, but we also want to increase capital, investment in Michigan. So we started a long time ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, creating a hot list, which is sort of like the best companies sort of fundraising about a year or so. And the application for the spring hot list is now open. So we're looking for these high potential, high growth companies in Michigan. We'll put up the URL they should apply to. But this is a great sort of next step for people after your pitch party, after Hirak's funding. But we'll have this list. Basically, we'll compile it. We'll get hundreds of companies. We'll then allow our VCs to look at it, and the people in our community basically look at it. And the top 50 will sort of be listed, and we'll also get them to come to an event May 18th, where they're going to actually have one-on-one meetings with all these venture capital firms. And we have firms from seed all the way up to growth stage in venture capital.
And we've often talked about Renaissance as being sort of a fund of funds. Part of your strategy is to invest in other VCs. So this is kind of like a perfect moment, because if someone's saying, how do I get in front of VCs? And they're thinking about a specific VC, put your application in for this hot list. It's going to go potentially in front of a whole bunch of folks that you guys are invested in. This is like the perfect front door. So if you ever wanted a way to get in, this is the way to do it. So send the application in.
Yeah, this is amazing. We get hundreds of people, basically. We get hundreds of VC firms basically that come through. So, and again, it's not all the ones that we're invested in, but again, people that want to do things in Michigan. We're just trying to get the best companies out there. The other thing it's good is that even if you apply and you don't get put on the list, this is a good signal. These lists is vetted by venture funders. So you're getting a signal, even if if you're not getting on this list, basically that this is this is what people are looking for to be on that list.
That's amazing. So this is the exception to the you need a warm introduction to a VC rule that we've talked about a few times on the show.
Well, we're the warm intro. We're trying to be the warm intro. So that's what we're doing.
That's awesome. Limitations here, it's Michigan-based companies for the list. Anything else that we should know about who should apply?
Again, we're always looking for VC fundable companies, which are usually high potential, high growth, early stage companies. If you're not looking for venture capital, we're probably not for you, and you probably wouldn't fit on the list. But again, we're looking for the more people. If you want to apply, there's no fee to apply. It's just a little bit of work, basically.
That's awesome. Well, Jeff, it's okay with you. We're gonna take that slide and stick it up through the end of the month in the news on MedTech Crossroads, so it gets in front of more people. So we're really thankful that you shared it today.
Perfect. Thanks again for your time, Gene.
Thanks for being here. Well, the fun news just keeps coming. Next up, I have got Ken Spenser with U of M's MCirc here to tell us some cool things. First of all, about the Massey Grand Challenge, which is a funding option for university startups. But then some really cool news about an MCirc company that just got some really cool news. So I'll leave that in your court, Ken. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gene. Let me just open this up a little bit. Okay, can everybody see my slide there?
Oh, let's see. It's not sharing just yet. Try again there.
I don't know why it's not doing that. Hang on. Go down to here.
If not, maybe I can. I think you might have sent it. There it is. You've got it.
Okay. All right. So thanks, Gene. This is like my 48th time on here. I don't think I've missed an episode.
You have not missed that episode, Ken. I think last year we made you the honorary co-host, and you're well on track for that again.
Well, thank you. So listen, so March 9th is the kickoff of our 2021 Massey TBI Virtual Grand Challenge. This will be our 7th year that we've done this. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Massey TBI effort there, thanks to a really generous over $20 million gift that the Massey family has provided to MCirc, we're able to sponsor these TBI challenges. If you're not familiar with the Masseys, if you're in Michigan, you knew the Masseys from the Massey Cadillac family there. And ironically, Mrs. Massey was involved in a severe car accident in northern Michigan, and they didn't think she was going to make it. She was medevaced down to University of Michigan, and Dr. Lena Napolitano was her primary neurosurgeon there. And anyway, we were able to save her life. She and her husband both have passed away, but her family has really been trying to focus on severe traumatic brain injury and what can we bring to the market to really help that. And so with that really generous gift, we've been able to run the Grand Challenge. There's several nice things about the Grand Challenge. This year we have over $900,000 to award to high risk, high reward projects and proposals that come in. We do not fund basic research, if you will. These are all high risk, high reward projects that would have great clinical impact if in fact they can work out there. So we look at multidisciplinary teams there that include both clinicians and engineers and or other scientists as required that are out there. And these are 1-year awards. Typically we reward $150K to a project out there. And we're kind of fail fast in this episode here. It's a 1-year award. However, if you make significant progress and the milestones are achieved, and you can ask for funding for the next year or the next year. We have several projects that we have funded for 3 years now out there. And we have a terrific team. The Kickoff here with Dr. Arastia, many of you probably wouldn't know him if you're not in the severe TBI world, but he's one of the world leaders in TBI, and he's from the University of Pennsylvania right now. And Dr. Shear is actually from Department of Defense Combat Casualty. We have a very close relationship with Combat Casualty, as you might suspect, if we're looking at severe TBI out there. We also always have a patient experience, which is one of our, I think people enjoy the most. And Dr. Rajaji will introduce his patient there and go through his story. It's really motivating, I think, to see how severely injured some of these people were, but what we're able now to get them back. So I would highly encourage you to do that. The link to join the Kickoff is at the bottom of the page here, and I've also put that up into the chat. It's free, so we would encourage, and it's Zoom, of course, so please take a look at that. The other good thing about the Grand Challenge is that it is a really quick turnaround. From the initial kickoff event to award is typically less than 4 months. And so for anybody that's been through some kind of SBIR or STTR kind of proposal, you know how quick that is. So no later than June 30th, the money is awarded, the codes are all set up, and the team can get up and running. And we help along the way. For instance, the 2-page proposal on the MCERC site, there's an outline there, and in the 2-page proposal, your really emphasis there is on value proposition and clinical impact. We don't expect you to have everything, fleshed out at that. If in fact the oversight committee, and this includes clinicians, the DoD, and business development people, all look at these, and we score all that, and then we select teams to put in a more detailed now 10-page proposal. Here we're asking for more specifics. And then from the 10-page proposal, we select teams, typically 8, that can go to what we call the Wolverine Den, which also has outside clinicians. We bring them in from around the country, as well as biz dev, as well as DoD. And at the end of the day, we pretty much have selected the teams that are going to go forward.
That's really That's really cool. We've got a couple of questions coming in here, Ken, and I think maybe disappointing news to them. I think the Massey challenge is this strictly for U of M researchers?
Okay, excellent question. Okay. There needs to be a U of M PI involved.
Oh, okay.
However, we have funded teams from other hospitals like Beaumont. We have several outside people that are interested in bringing their project in. Right now, the only requirement we have is that they're teamed up with a U of M PI.
So we've got some questions coming in here from folks who I believe are part of startups. If they were teamed up with a U of M PI and thought they could address some of these issues, would they be?
There is a possibility. We have done that, to be quite honest. In fact, Dr. Weeder, who is going to be one of our pitches here, he came to us after they had already started a startup there. The question we always have to go through with is on if there's new IP there, then Michigan has to be a part of that. And we always have to vet that with tech transfer. So there is
Gotcha.
an added step there.
Tech transfer has to be involved in that. That's great. I mean, it sounds like it's worth following up for these folks. We're running a little bit low on time, so I want to make sure we get to the other point here. So is there anything else we should know about this? How can they contact MCirc about the Grand Challenge?
Okay, so if you go to that link, that goes through the whole Grand Challenge, and then if you're invited to ask questions in there, and we can, and I'm usually always involved in that, so we'll get back to you just very quickly.
That's great.
Okay.
Tell Ken, I heard you on the show, and I want to submit. If you can put that first page back up there, Ken, that has, I think, the link on it. We'll make sure we get that in front of people. Is the link on that one actually, or where is the link?
Right at the bottom of the page there.
Right at the bottom of the page. Let's see. I think we're seeing that.
Also put it in the chat.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, we wanted to get just maybe 30 seconds here, but some really, really good news this week. Ken, tell us what we should know.
Yeah. So one of our great Massey projects that was really high risk and really high reward was a machine learning predictive analytic we called analytic for hemodynamic instability. And it is really cool. I mean, in the ICU setting, we can detect hours, and I mean several hours ahead of time of when a person is decomposing, well ahead of the highly trained nurses and highly trained doctors that are there. So and one of the really cool things is that we're able to attract a wonderful CEO who's been on your program before, Jen Baird, highly successful person out there. And she took the team there and formed a company called Fifth Eye, which I would encourage everybody to Google and look at, learn more about that. And she was able to raise over $11 million out there. But the really cool thing is that we received the de novo classification from the FDI this week, which allows them to begin to market the product. And as Gene did a wonderful job, the de novo classification is really valuable. I know you pointed that out as you went through that with everybody. So we are really excited. I'm almost as excited as Jen is, but so we're really looking forward to working with them and getting that working out in the marketplace.
That's wonderful. It's so exciting to be able to have you announce that today. That news just came out, I think, yesterday or the day before. Yes. And we're just so excited for them. Great local story. Still not there. They're not on the market yet. But man, what a massive hurdle to have jumped. Ken, thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate it, and all your time you spend with us every week on MedTech Crossroads. Great asset, sir.
Thank you.
Such great news, and you hear us talk about how big a challenge that is, and a de novo is no joke. So wonderful to see that in the local community. Hopefully we can have the folks from Fifth Eye back on at some point to talk about their experiences. Well, next up, it is that time again, folks. The feedback was so wonderful. We are so thankful for everybody who participated in our February pitch party. And right now, it is time for the March installation of the MedTech Crossroads pitch party. I'm going to throw just the ground rules up here again really quick. The first one of those is what we call the Walt Young rule, and this served us very well. I was very thankful to all of our judges who really took the spirit of what Walt had said. We can't pick winners and losers. Running a successful company is very different from pitching well. All we can do is think about some cool ideas, tell the entrepreneurs what we like, what we don't like, and we've got to keep in mind that we could be wrong, just like Fred Smith's professor was, who said that his concept was interesting and well-formed, but in order to earn better than a C, the idea must be feasible. So he just went on to found FedEx and proved that pundit completely wrong. With that, I got to remind you, go ahead and send your pitch decks to pitchparty@medtechcrossroads.org to be eligible for selection for a pitch party. We're looking for April startups at this point, and you've got to have the PowerPoint with the areas of problem statement, vision, value proposition, your team, milestones, business model, competitors, and ask, or at least the functionally equivalent areas of that, even if they're not titled exactly that way. And with that, I want to welcome onto the show Mark Harburg, who is the founder of SafetySit, who is our pitch party contestant today. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
It's great to have you. Without further ado, we're going to have you get your screen, your slides up on the screen, and we're going to give you 10 minutes on the clock and let you take it away all to yourself once we get those slides up.
Awesome. Very good.
Wonderful. Well, looks like we got them up. Mark, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Harburg. I'm the CEO and co-founder of SafetySit. We aim to make therapy simpler, safer, and more reliable. In a hospital, when clinicians work with disabled or recovering patients within rehabilitation, they need their patients be sitting upright and on the side of a hospital bed. This is known as edge-of-bed therapy. However, this task is really hard to do by oneself, so they have to go out of their way, find additional staff to bring them in, and act as essentially a human backrest to manually support these patients up for extended periods of time. Obviously, this is extremely inefficient. It's also very costly. In the US, this costs hospitals $1.8 billion every single year for this unnecessary support staff labor. In addition to this, you can imagine the demographic. Most of the clinicians are women, and they sometimes have to lift 200 to 500 pound patients several times a day. So it's very injury prone, and injury does happen. When speaking with these clinicians, they find this work very undesirable, and they also agree that it's really not the safest solution for the patients themselves. So this is why we've developed our device, the SafetySit. It's the world's first portable backrest that could be just dropped on a bed. There's no attachment necessary, but what's important to the clinicians is the fact that, we're reducing the number of staff that has to be present. So we're going down to a single clinician with the use of our device. And due to that, we're also reducing the risk of injury to the clinicians themselves. And we believe that we will also increase patient satisfaction to the patients themselves. Our device significantly reduces labor costs. That's the bottom line. COVID has, this last year, as we all know, has amplified the issue through staff reductions, and hospitals right now are really looking at their labor costs more than ever. Just looking at a 300-bed hospital, if they were to purchase 30 of our devices, implementing that would save them almost $1 million every single year. On top of the labor savings, preventing just one injury would save a hospital 15 to 20 times the cost of our device. Based off our projections, we're looking for a $250,000 initial seed round to get the best return for our investors. We're doing this at a $2 million pre-money valuation. We're hoping to close this by end of July of this year. We can get very far quickly with these funds, as we are an FDA Class 1 510K exempt, but not GMP exempt medical device. Basically meaning all I have to do left at this point is just register to the FDA before it starts selling. So with these funds, we want to register, we want to build an initial batch of inventory, we want to expand out our team and invest in direct marketing efforts And based on the great interest that we've had to date, we know that market efforts such as trade shows, online presence, and other events will go far in terms of account acquisition. We plan to exit within 5 years. Typical medical device companies see 10 to 12 multiple on revenue. So based on our projections, we're hoping by the end of the 5th year here, in the future, to see a $3 to $10 million return for a 10% interest in our company. We find that exciting. Hope that you are excited by that as well. We are on track to be shipping product by June of this year. We're at a design freeze. Our patent is already issued, and we've just begun initializing manufacturing. And we have hospitals that are ready to trial and use our device today. We've also put together a very comprehensive, excellent team with a range of expertise. I myself have a background in product design and manufacturing engineering. Been doing that for about 8 years. My co-founder, Franz Narowski, is currently a COO of a small business, and he has extensive finance, business development, and strategy. And then on the medical device side, we brought in Chris Holland, who brings in the commercialization expertise. He has experience with medical device sales, both direct and distribution, both domestic and international sales. And he's previously a chief commercialization officer for a mid to large size medical device company. In addition to this, we have a strong board of advisors made up of healthcare clinicians, FDA regulatory experts, and some successful startup entrepreneurs. Our initial target market is US hospitals. This is a $188 million opportunity. But what's important here is that we have no direct competition. This is a completely unserved market for us. In addition to the hospitals, we have outpatient care facilities, long-term care facilities, and home care. Altogether, including hospitals, this brings us to well over $500 million total addressable market. But that number is being relatively conservative. There is definitely room in different departments, particularly in hospitals and some of these other facilities that we have not included in this calculation. And again, this is also untapped for these markets as well. Our business model is determined by discipline and account acquisition. We do this primarily through direct sales. By the end of this year, we will have clinical data from 5 ROI studies from Michigan hospitals proving out our value proposition. So for example, we're going to have data that'll show that one device can save a hospital, anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 a year. This, having this data will be armed to go out and scale our sales and marketing efforts, and we want to close 40 accounts by the end of 2022, which will put us in a position to really start growing much faster in 2023. Now, the reason we're able to get so much interest generated before we've even launched, from a number of hospitals is, to you and I, this may just seem like a chair, but when I bring this device in and I show it to physical therapists, occupational therapists, and other nurses, they get really, really excited. They say things like, "Oh, we have to have this," or "This is a godsend." And they're very excited and very passionate clinicians that are actually the ones pushing to have this device in their hospital today. So it's very exciting for us. We have healthy profit margins at around 80%. There is room to grow there once we move to kind of an investment tooling. We can make about $1,000 per unit. But what's more important is that we also plan on making annuity sales through disposable covers, as well as some additional accessories and add-ons that we'll be adding to the portfolio, adding about $1,000 a year per unit. As you can see, our revenue kind of hockey sticks up. Keep in mind that this does not include all the markets. This is primarily just the hospital initial target market, with dabbling in a bit of home care. Our vision as a company is we want to be the leaders when it comes to developing a suite of patient handling and rehabilitation solutions. The next biggest market for us is the home care market. There's 6.5 million unpaid caregivers in the US that are working with some disabled person, whether it be their parents or their grandparents. We want to basically make a very similar device to what we have now, but much more economical. for them. On top of this, I've been in and out of a lot of hospitals. I've seen a lot of things. There's a lot of opportunity and problems that I'd like to solve and things that we're working on now to address as future products for us. So in summary, SafetySit solves a $1.8 billion unnecessary support labor cost to hospitals today. We're looking for initial pre-seed investment of $250,000. We're going to use that to register, build our inventory, build out our team, and go big. We want to exit in 5 years or less to get the best return for our investors. We have our patent. We're queued up for production. We have evaluations all lined up for multiple hospitals right now. There's a $500 million untapped market with room to grow. Our team checks off all the boxes to be successful. And we have healthy profit margins with annuity coming in every single year. So if you're interested in talking with me, my information is on the screen. Please feel free to reach out. And just remember, with SafetySit, we've got your back. Thank you very much.
That's great, Mark. We appear to be having a video problem on my end here, but I hope you can still hear me. And I wanted to ask you the question that I love to ask everybody, because this is not an easy thing. Running a startup is not an easy thing to do. There must be a passion that drives you. There must be a reason that you're doing this. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, this problem kind of fell into my lap actually in school. Came from a clinician themselves, and I kind of have the entrepreneurial bug, and I saw this, and I was like, man, this is crazy that there's no solution for this, for something that's as simple as this, right? And after interviewing, well over 200 different clinicians across the states, the injuries that have occurred just from holding up patients, I'm like, someone's got to solve this. I'm here, I'm doing this, and I've been running with it for the last 5 years. So yeah, it's just, I'm learning every single day. It's fun. It's hard at times, but it's also very rewarding.
Well, we're very thankful that you're doing it and that you were here with us today on the show. Tune back in the last Friday of the month, and we'll have our judges offering up their thoughts and their feedback. We really appreciate your participation today, Mark.
No, thanks for having me here.
And with that, we are going to wrap very quickly here at the end of the show. I do want to see, though, if anyone on the line has any announcements you want to make or any Q&A that you want to do. Don't forget to tune in next week. We've got Dr. Ing Pottinger from Columbia University talking all things COVID. So we are looking forward to that. Not seeing any hands raised at the moment. I want to thank you all for being here on our 48th episode, and we're looking forward to next week. Thanks for being here with us on MedTech Crossroads. Bye-bye.